You wanna?
Good. I will launch it off then. We are here today with the National Communication Association Training and Development Division, and that's where I met Dennis and Robin and Craig and Pooey, and you definitely have a lot in store for the next hour. They are fun, loving, dynamic people, as they put in their ad there that about the webinar. But through the National Communication Association, NCA, we do have our annual convention coming up in Salt Lake City, November 8th through 11th. I got to put that plug in there. Hopefully we can meet you face to face at that time. But in the meantime, today we have our second webinar. It's the best practices for effective one-on-one communication coaching, here with Robin Golinsky and Dennis Becker. And they're executive coaches, and they also were former chairs of this division as well. And they've coached thousands of people. When I looked at your profiles there, I saw that thousands there in about 75 years total. You both have worked in this area between the two of you. Obviously, neither one of you is old enough to do that alone, but together you did. And with that said, I definitely want to launch this out and thank everybody who's come to spend this hour with us for this professional development free event that we have. And I encourage you to reach out to our division if you're not a member, to join it and to take advantage of the upcoming webinars we do have. But let me start off right now, end here with having Robin and Dennis start off for you. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Dee.
Well, thank you, Dee. Appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. It's great to almost see you and certainly hear some of you. We'll see some of you typing on the screen as we go along. We are perhaps doing a, do you know the title of this? Can we get the title, Steve?
She just said.
But the title of this is Some Best Practices for One-on-One Communication Coaching. That's the title. And that's what we're talking about today. Now, the we, you heard, Dennis Becker and Robin Golinsky. We're the company called the Speech Improvement Company. Just a brief note that this company is the oldest speech coaching firm in the United States. We actually have clients around the world, offices in several different countries and continents. So we're accomplished in this, and we feel really comfortable with the subject that we're going to be talking about today. We're saying that so that you feel comfortable asking us any questions, making any comments that you think would be helpful as we go along. So, Robin, is there anything you want to say in introduction? Should we get started?
No, we're going to get started. It's a little awkward shifting to sharing the screen, but we're also going to end with a personal touch, connecting with you through video. So we'll be doing that awkward transition back to video again. So without further ado,
so let's get up to our first slide here. We want to talk a little bit about this. Where are the slides?
Here they come. Hang on.
Okay, that's the title.
Hold on.
And
wait, I need Craig, somebody to tell me that it's working when it works.
It's loading.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, cool. Okay, so that's the title, obviously. Notice we're talking about some best practices, not everything. Obviously, in this short period of time, we can't talk about everything. We're going to talk about some of the best practices that Robin and I have found over the many, many years that we've been doing one-on-one coaching. So this is us. This is who we are. It's who we're with, Speech Improvement Company. And this title, this program is coming out of this book. Now, perhaps you've heard about this book. Let me show a picture of this book that's up here. Who's got it? There it is. The Handbook of Communication Training just came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is a production of the National Communication Association's Training and Development Division. In this book, we identified the 7 best practices for anyone who wants to be in a coaching training situation. These are the 7 things you should know. And that's what this book is all about. It took us 3 years to research it, a year to write it. And J.D. Wallace and I were delighted to have the privilege of doing all of that. So this is what's the start of our thinking about today's webinar. Now, in the book, we identified 7 best practices. Robin and I are only going to talk about 2 of them today. So those 2 deal with one-on-one coaching.
Okay, perfect.
All right, let's begin with why we're even doing this. Why? Well, we're doing this so that those of you who are interested in becoming one-on-one coaches, if you're just studying it and you're looking forward to doing it, this webinar is going to be very valuable to you because you're going to be hearing some of the things that both Robin and I have found to be successful over the many years. And we're going to, of course, hear from some of the other folks who are tuned in. So for you, it's going to be very beneficial in starting your career. And for those of you who have been doing it for a long time, we hope to strengthen your skills in the one-on-one coaching that you do by introducing you to perhaps a couple of new ideas as we go along. So now how are we going to do all of that? Well, we're going to talk about two different aspects of this. We'll talk about both the content and the process of one-on-one coaching. And this is a little bit tricky because we only have less than an hour. So who can possibly talk about all of the aspects of content, about what you talk about in one-on-one coaching? It's almost impossible, all the kinds of topics that come up. So content, we'll get into that a little bit. Process is a different thing. Process is something that has to do with the way in which the best practices up. That's where we're going to focus most of our time. And before we get too far into that, I want to talk a little bit about you and your ability to jump into one-on-one coaching. And there's something about you that you need to know about yourself before we even get to that, talking about content and process. And if I may borrow from our old friends Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato, I want you to be able to know thyself. Now, in particular, there are things we want you to know about yourself. As a communication coach, when you get into this whole thing and you're starting to become a coach, or even if you're in it, there are certain things you should know about your attitude. What attitude do you have about coaching? We'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. What are the hooks and biases that you have? What are the sort of things that get you going as a coach? And then there's this thing called ABC. What's that? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, listen, we could go on and on and on about attitudes because everybody's got them. Everybody has something. You have attitudes about baseball, about ice cream, about cars. You have attitudes about everything. It's not a bad thing. Attitudes in and of themselves are not bad. It's what you do with them and how they control you that we're concerned about today. Because your attitudes that you have about communication coaching are going to create the mindset which ultimately ends up in the behaviors that you bring to your coaching. So the first thing you need to know about yourself and about coaching is what are the attitudes that you hold about one-on-one communication coaching. Now, I mean, again, this list could be endless. What's your attitude about coaching older people? What's your attitude about coaching standing up? What's your attitude about coaching in the dark? What's your attitude about coaching sitting side by side? I mean, there's so many things that formulate the topics, the content, and even the process of one-on-one coaching. As you see, we'll move this right along. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but we're going to talk a little bit about attitudes and the attitudes that you bring to your one-on-one communication coaching. This is important because, this is ABC, this is important because attitudes become communication. What you think is eventually going to become the way you behave. So ABC, attitudes become communication. So we need to look at them, and you need to look at them. You need to know thyself. What is your mindset?
Nonverbal and verbal.
Absolutely.
Just to emphasize that, because sometimes you think you're controlling your attitude, what you're saying verbally, but it's showing up. This is why I encourage people to self-coach by watching themselves in a mirror when they're on a conference call, so they can see what their patterns are non-verbally and what mixed messages they might be sending.
So let's talk just for a second. I mean, I don't want to get too far into this, and I don't want to take us off the track, but it's important for each of you to know, in order to be a good coach, you have to understand what your attitudes are about coaching and where they come from. So they are in your mind. Those attitudes are set in your mind somewhere. All right, where are they? They are here in your conscious, your subconscious, and your unconscious mind. Let me give you a quick explanation. Conscious mind is what you and I are both using right now. It's what we use to think, to talk, to interact on a live, interactive basis. Subconscious mind is where all the things that you've ever learned are stored. If you have a pen or a pencil in your hand right now, put it flat on the table in front of you. not to pick it up. When you pick it up, your fingers wrap right around it. That wasn't always the case. There was a time when you had to learn how to pick up a pen or a pencil. Now you know, because that learning is in your subconscious. You don't have to think about how you walk. You learned how to walk. You don't think about how to talk. All that stuff is in your subconscious. So are your attitudes about one-on-one communication coaching. So your subconscious is very important to you. Now your unconscious, that's simply what happens to us when we go to sleep. You're not thinking about anything. Your mind goes to sleep. This is why we have crazy dreams and so forth. It's not controlled as easily as the conscious or the subconscious. So I just want you to get the sense of it. Your attitudes come from your subconscious. They're in your mindset, which is contained in your subconscious mind. All right, now, maybe enough of that. We won't go any deeper than that. So let's get back to what we're going to talk about. Content. Well, frankly, folks, we've only got a short while here. This is a webinar. It's not a seminar. It's not even a workshop. What we could talk about in content could take an entire semester. What is the content of one-on-one coaching? But for us today, it simply depends. It depends on who you're coaching, what that need is, what your skills are. Content of what gets coached.
Let's give some examples.
Okay, for instance.
Like very nuanced examples.
Okay, well, Robin, let me ask you. When you've been coaching, all the years you've been coaching, what are the most frequent or most popular things that you are asked to coach on?
With women, I'm often asked, they want to sound more authoritative or be more assertive or be able to negotiate. Or if they're in a very male-dominated industry, they want to be able to interject their insight into a meeting, but they feel like they're interrupting when they interject. So we practice that. It can vary all over the place. I've had college students come to me who need to conduct college interviews, so their parents have forced them to come to me.
So you hear Robin qualifying it with women, with college students. We can go on and on with men, with CEOs, with politicians, with et cetera, et cetera, et
Sometimes
cetera.
foreign people who don't understand culturally, so they're trying to communicate effectively with Americans.
Exactly. It depends on who and what you're dealing with. The variables are almost endless as to what the content could be. So it depends. We're not here to tell you what the content should be because it depends. It depends on who you're working with and what you're doing and what the purpose is. But let me ask you something while we're right here. Here's a question for each of you. If you can, type your answers in on the screen. Who is your client? When you're coaching, who's your client? Is it the person sitting in front of you, or is it the person who hired you to coach the person sitting in front of you, one who's paying your bill? I'd love to see some answers on that if you can. Type in there, and Craig, let us know when you get some responses to that. There's a totally different perspective if you say, my client is the person sitting right in front of me. Or if you say, well, my client is the one who hired me. They're the one who's paying the bill, and they know why I'm here, and they qualified me, and blah, blah, blah. So let us know what you think.
Craig,
we've got some coming in.
Yeah, somebody's saying they have no audio. I'm not sure if we can help them with that.
I'm looking at the thing. Audio's coming in. Nobody looks like they're muted out, so.
Somebody named Danita is saying she has no audio. It's probably on her end.
Maybe on her end, yeah.
And someone's trying to send an attachment. Don't do that. I'll kick everyone into guest mode. So, so people are saying things like, do you want me to share like what they think are their client?
Yes,
sure.
Absolutely, Craig. Thank you.
Yeah, person in front of me, the people I am coaching, it depends both. The next person who will hire me. You're directly working with one and the one who commissioned the coaching, and lots of people are just saying both.
Yeah, well, that's probably true in many ways, depending on how you look at it. Here you go. Depending on your attitude, who's paying your bill, or who's sitting in front of you. Depending on which one you say is the client, it's going to determine a little bit how you're going to do the coaching, and particularly what you may do about the coaching after that particular session is done, like getting more business and so forth. So anyway,
I have a good example. So I got hired by a medical device company to give one-on-one personal development coaching to one of their employees. And they signed her up for a whole package. It was like 12 sessions. And it was confidential, and they knew it was confidential. They said, absolutely, here's what we'd like to see her develop. No problem. Signed up, contract. In the process of coaching her, what started to come out is that she wasn't a good fit for that company. And she actually didn't want to be there anymore. And so that was awkward because it's a confidential session. They're paying the bill, but I'm giving her what she needs. So it's very dicey situation.
it is, and I've had several of those. So what do you do? Do you report? What did you do, Rob? Did you report back to the one who hired you?
Oh, sorry, guys.
What did you do?
I tied my...
What did you do? Did you report back to the person who had hired you, or did you continue just coaching the person who was with you?
I did not disclose the confidential information, obviously, but I did, sorry, I'm trying to get us back to the thing while I'm talking, but I did give her the coaching that she needed. So, and she ended up, it's her personal decision, right, of where she's going to end up. So that's how I handled it.
And you see
Sorry for the tech.
the inferences in all of this, implications and inferences here, folks, have to do with the relationship that you develop with that client, both clients, the person who hired you and the person in front of you. You need to have a relationship that allows you to feel comfortable either reporting or not reporting, establishing in the beginning what are the confidential aspects of the coaching and so forth. So see what I mean? In a sense, the content here depends. It depends on the situation that you're in, the variables that surround that situation. So we're not going to try to tell you what to coach in terms of content. You have some sense of that, hopefully. You're trained in that. You get a feel for where your strengths are, where the needs are for that particular client, and then you proceed to develop your learning plan and the content in the learning plan depending on all of that. So I hope that makes sense. And we don't want to go too much further into that, although I know we could.
But we do encourage you to keep sending your questions in as we go, because we want this to be as relevant for you as it can be.
All right. So the other part of this is the question one is process. So this means the process with which you conduct that one-on-one communication coaching experience. The process itself. How do you do it? What are some of the best practices that you should be following as a good, effective one-on-one communication coach? Well, there's a lot of them. And as Robin and I talked about this, and there's so many best practices that we have learned work over the years and are important. And we had a hard time in the short period of time we have with you. We had a hard time narrowing it down, but we did come to three particular things that we feel are absolutely essential best practices. If you are going to be
the core,
these are the core. If you're going to be an effective communication coach, you need to be able to do these three things. The first one, we just put out here the word.
Sorry, it's not responding. There.
Questioning. There it is. So you need to be able to question. Now, I know that don't jump all over. Those of you who are assessment people, no, don't jump all over. So I realize you got to do assessments and so forth. It's all involved in this. Questioning, we mean, has to do with figuring out what's going to be talked about, what the content would be. Do you use open or closed questions? For example, you know what the difference between those are. All right, I'm not going to go into that. That's pretty basic. Should you use rhetorical or active answer questions? Now, this is an interesting thing. Rhetorical questions, we all know. The question you ask and you answer. Active answer questions are questions that you ask and they answer. So both of these are important kinds of questions to use with your client and in the assessing of what's going to be done and so forth. So knowing the difference between them. All too often.
Give an example.
Yeah, I was just about, thanks, Robin, because all too often we see people asking rhetorical questions, and the person on the other side thinks it's an active answer question, and they start answering you. And you didn't really want them to answer, but they start because they didn't know it was supposed to be rhetorical. So one of the things you learn is not only what's the difference between those two, but to let your learner, your client, know which one you're asking.
How do they know?
Well, you simply say, John, I want to ask you a rhetorical question. Boom.
Oh, so you label it.
Sure.
Do you have other methods in which you do it so that you let them know that it's rhetorical?
Well, you can simply say to him, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want you to answer, but I'm going to, like that. It's just be direct about it. But if you don't be direct, a client will often just start talking, and it may throw off the form or the pattern that you wanted to pursue as a coach and what you're coaching. So rhetorical or active answer questions are helpful, but they're very different, and you got to know the difference. Okay. In addition to that, for questioning, there's challenging or affirming questions. Challenging or affirming questions. For instance, Robin.
Yes.
If I say to you, if I ask you a question and I say, Robin, why do you experience this fear of speaking that you have? Now, am I asking Robin that in a challenging way or an affirming way?
That's challenging.
It is. In that case, it might be challenging, particularly if we add to that inflection or tone or speed or all of that. So you want to know the difference between the two. A challenging question is one that causes your listener to think, causes your client to think about what their attitude or behavior is, challenges them to think about it. You're not challenging them in the sense of, I dare you, not that. You're challenging them in the sense of, think about it. Why is it that you feel this way? What has brought you to this conclusion? That's the kind of challenging that we're talking about. But what can you think, Robin, can you think of an example of an affirming question?
I was just beating my brains out with that. Affirming, meaning that you would want to ask a question that already, the answer's already implied in the question.
So that you know by their answering it, it's going to affirm something that you're working on, right? And it affirms that they get it, that you've been coaching, working on a particular thing, and you want to be sure they got it, so you ask them a question about it, and their answer tells you whether or not they were able to understand it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So there's the difference between challenging or affirming questions. This skill of questioning is basic. It's really core, as Robin said before. It's core to your being a good one-on-one coach. You need to be able to do all of these kinds of questions in the course of the work that you do in your one-on-one coaching. Okay, so questioning is one of the things that we're talking about. Second one that we want you to know about is listening. What? Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't, okay.
Harder than it is.
Yeah, it's harder than you think. Listen, and hear are two different things.
Yeah.
Hearing is the ability of your ear and your brain to simply absorb the sound outside of your brain. Listening is being able to differentiate, to effectively differentiate between and amongst the sounds, to be evaluative with what you're hearing.
A big part of good listening, I think, is getting out of your own way too, putting yourself, getting out of your own head. So it can be tricky to put that aside, especially if you're new to one-on-one coaching and you're wanting to get it right and you're trying to do things perfectly. It's very important if you've ever done anything with mindfulness or any work with bringing your full presence. That, I think, is the very first step. It's a mindset. Setting your mindset that you're bringing your full presence to the listening mode. Just a very simple decision to do that 10 seconds, 30 seconds before you start is actually a huge paradigm shift in the way we mostly go through life. And then there's some specific things.
Yeah, this mindfulness thing, if you don't know what mindfulness is, shame on you. You should know by this point. But mindfulness is the ability to be completely 100% focused on a specific thing that's happening in your life at the moment, such as breathing. When you breathe, can you feel the air going through into your lungs, coming out? Can you feel what it's like passing through your nose or your mouth? You're sitting perhaps right now. Can you feel the texture of the chair? the hardness, the softness? How about the room you're in? Can you feel the temperature? Mindfulness is being able to focus on something so specifically, so completely, that you're devoid of thinking of anything else. It's a wonderful skill, and it's not easy to do, and it takes a while, but being a good listener is in large part dependent upon your ability to focus on that thing that you're, that person you're talking to, that
Your
topic,
full presence.
and being fully present
People
to
feel
it.
the difference too. They know whether you're fully present or not. 100%.
yeah.
They're never going to tell you,
Oh, yeah.
but they feel it.
Well, you know yourself, guys. When
Yeah,
you're,
everybody does.
yeah, when you're listening to somebody, when you're talking to somebody, you can kind of tell whether they're listening or not. It's not only eye contact and body language, and all of that, of course, these are clues. But you can tell when there's an engagement there, when they're listening to you. As a coach, you have got to be a good listener. I know you're there to help them be good talkers. You got to be a good listener to be a good talker. You really do.
And I think what's hard with the one-on-one coaching, and correct me if you disagree, but I think what's really hard is you want to fix things, right? So your brain is going 100 miles an hour about, oh, I know what they need to do. Oh, I know how I can fix, and you may miss the most important thing. So allowing that space for them to truly show up and just observe. We're going to talk about what you're actually.
Okay, so it's a good first question then to ask yourself is, what are you listening for? So you of course you have a learning plan and you have some sense of where you're going, but that may change. I mean, clients say things that you didn't expect them to say, and you change directions. Okay, good coach can do that on the drop of a hat, no big deal. But no, what are you listening for? What kind of information are you gathering? So that will sometimes indicate what type of question you ask. We just talked about types of questions. What are you listening for? Are you listening for fact, for feeling, for information? What are you listening for? That's the very first thing.
Attitude.
Attitude, absolutely.
Which often shows up in word choice.
Yep. All right. When you get ready, that means get ready, for goodness sakes. Stop thinking about other things if you possibly can. Stop your mind wandering. This is where mindfulness comes in. Start by getting ready. Have a pen or a pencil. Turn off the radio. Close the door. Turn off your phone. All of that sort of stuff. Just get ready for this coaching session. Get ready to listen to what's being said to you. Your client is going to know the difference as to whether you're ready or not, that you can be fully attentive with them, fully present with them. This is what get ready means. Make sure you think about that stuff ahead of time. Once that client walks in, sits down, starts talking to you, you are ready. You're there. You're present. You're with them. All right. Then you have to be able to pay attention. What? That's not different. That's not this. No, that's different. It's not the same thing. Getting ready and pay attention are not the same thing. You can possibly you can pay attention to something and still not be listening very well. There's a difference between, here's a new word. There's a difference between paying attention and being focused on something. You right now, hopefully, you are paying attention to what we're saying and you are focused on what we're saying. You might be, some of you may well, there's over 100 people out there listening to us right now. Some of you may very well be paying attention to your phone right now. You got a message. You're looking at the headlines. Something. You're paying attention. We're sort of in the background, but you're more focused on that phone. So paying attention means that you're there, you're with that person, and you are focusing. You're focused on them. So getting ready is one thing. Paying attention and focusing is quite another. Now, this one is really tough. This may be one of the toughest things you're going to have to learn today. How do you control your biases?
Well, do you even know what they are?
Oh,
Most people don't know what they are.
that's where we go.
And they're strange. Like some people don't even realize that they have a bias against, I don't know, men with beards or middle-aged women, or it could be anything.
Anything.
People with Uggs.
Yep. Anything. That's why we started out talking about mindset and attitudes, biases. These things are extremely controlling of you, unless you are controlling of them. Now remember, we're not telling you what to be biased for. We're not even telling you not to have bias. Everybody has a bias. We all have biases.
Yeah.
Biases about broccoli, about chocolate ice cream. It's not just attitudes, it's bias. It's a distinct feeling for or against something. That's what a bias is. We're not telling you not to have them. We are saying to you, you as a good one-on-one communication coach must learn to control your biases, not allow those biases to influence your behavior. Let me give you a quick example of this. I had a client who called me and said, listen, we've got a woman who's answering the phones for us at the front desk, and she's very important to our company, but she's giving the wrong impression to people who call. We're getting complaints that she's rude to them and that she cuts them off and so on. Will you listen? Okay, fine. So I go over and I listen to this woman. I put on a pair of headsets and I was sitting next to her, listening to her take the calls. And within a few minutes, I realized, oh boy, okay, I know what this is. Okay, so we took a break. In the break, I heard her name happened to be Francis. I said, Francis, I noticed that when you were talking to some of the folks who called in, you sounded one way in a different way with other folks. She said, no, I treat everybody the same. I said, not really. And I had taped some of it. So here's what happened. When a caller would call in, it was a mortgage company actually, they'd call in and they ask information about it. If this person had some kind of a foreign accent, I heard a distinct difference in the way that Francis would react to those folks. If they didn't have a foreign, other than the American accent, if they didn't have a foreign accent, she treated them differently. And I played the difference for her. Well, what do you mean? She still didn't get it. I had to play it again. People who had an accent, she treated differently. More curt, more direct, the border of being rude, but curt and direct. Those who didn't, amiable, affable, courteous, different. Why is that, Francis? I don't know. Francis got her thinking about it. Guess what she said? She said, well, listen, all I can tell you is that these people who come in here and they come from other countries, they want to take our jobs, and pretty soon I'll be replaced by somebody who barely even speaks English. She had a bias about people who had accents of any kind. Any kind.
Did she self-correct from listening to the audio?
She had a hard time thinking that she had this bias. She didn't hear it until I pointed it out. And I played it again and again. And then she was, oh my God. She hated it. She hated the fact that she had this bias. Now, it wasn't my job to say, Francis, get rid of that bias. It wasn't my job to do that. My job was to help her not treat people that differently.
And to point out the nuances of her tone or rate, her pace or inflection, whatever it was, that was not neutral.
Exactly. So you, as a communication coach, you are going to have biases and attitudes. Is why we talk about that. What are they? Well, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but you better know what they are. Coaching people with a certain kind of an accent. Coaching people who are a certain size. Who knows? Whatever those biases are, if you're going to be a good, effective communication coach, you've got to learn to be able to deal with everyone. I hope, unless you have a bias against that, that's up to you. But in our experience, hopefully we have learned to control our biases to the point where we can and have coached practically all kinds of people from all walks of life successfully. So control your bias is a very important part of being a good listener. Next.
That was a great example. I have some questions here if you don't mind fielding them.
Oh, yeah, great.
Do it.
Yeah, so one individual is asking, can you give definitions of focusing and paying attention, like maybe more concrete examples? And building on that, what do you do if a client is not focused?
Good question. So paying attention, like Dennis is paying attention right now to my hand waving in his peripheral vision, but he's not focused on it. That's a real simplistic version of it.
So if I turn my head and I look at that hand, I will then focus on it.
Focus now.
Oh, I'm getting sleepy. Okay. So the difference is really, it's sort of big and small. Attention is a big thing. You're paying attention to the room. Where, for instance, many of you may be sitting in a room right now, which, follow me, You're sitting in a room, you're paying attention to what's going on in this webinar, but now I'm going to ask you to listen to the air conditioning.
Focus on it.
You're focusing on the air conditioning.
Depends where they are. They may not have
Well,
AC.
I know. If you don't have it,
We don't.
Then never mind.
Anyway.
But you see the point? When you're in a room, you're paying attention to what's going on in the room. You're not really paying attention to the air conditioning until someone says it. Then you can, oh yeah, I hear. Then you're focused on it. So attention and focus are two different things. Does that help, I hope?
There was something else you said though, Craig. What was it? An additional.
Sure. So what do you do if a client is not focused? So you're talking about the coach being focused, but sometimes clients aren't focused. I think your example of recording was a good one. Is there any others?
Yes. So we probably do different things because we're different styles, but I would typically say, it seems like something's distracting you right now, and I want you to get the absolute most out of this session. Is there something that you can that you need to do, a phone call you need to make, or something that you need to wrap up so that you can, get the most out of this session? Now, what I typically do, which always works, is I frame it in what I call the language of benefit. I don't talk about what I need. I talk about what's going to be beneficial to them. It's that simple shift that people usually respond to because, let's face it, everybody only cares about what's in it for them.
Now I'll tell you something. I can't even count the number of workshops and clients I've had over the years. And there are times when that I need them to be focusing on something. And I can tell they're not focusing. They're not making eye contact. Maybe they're jotting notes that are not related to what we're doing. Maybe they're glancing at their phone or whatever. I mean, I'll call them out right away. I did this just last week. I was in the Mideast last week working with some clients in the Mideast, and the guy was doing this. So in the middle of whatever I was talking about, I just said, "Hello, Mohammed. Hello." Louder volume, used his name. I got in his face with it.
But you can get away with that as being a senior person. That's a risky technique.
Yes.
Obviously, for if somebody who's young.
Okay, gentler technique. Same kind of thing. He's distracted. I will lean over the table to him. I'll just lean over, and in a softer voice, "Mohammed, do you want to take a break for a couple of minutes?" Very quiet.
That's a little nicer way.
Very friendly. Right?
Some of you that are professors out there may already have a bunch of techniques, but if in a workshop, let's say Dennis is in a workshop and he's distracted, I wouldn't look at him. I don't know if you can see me all right. I would just physically move over where he is, maybe touch the table, and I'm looking out at somebody else. So just my physical presence as the instructor near him usually is sufficient to make people go, "Oh, busted," and put their stuff away.
In a one-on-one setting, it's kind of hard to stand up and move forward. But now this is what I'm about to suggest. You have an attitude about this, but hear me out.
I do?
No, not you.
Oh, you in general.
No, listen.
Oh, okay.
People have attitude about this, what I'm about to suggest. So you have to figure this out. Does it work in your style? What's your attitude towards it? You could lean across the table and just touch that person's paper or touch their arm. That instantly is going to get their attention. Now, I hear all the brains going about harassment and everything else. You cannot just do it. You have to know that you're in a kind of a relationship that allows for that. So touching someone it's touchy. So be careful. If you're in a relationship that you think will allow it, that will bring their focus back. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you can do that will bring them back to focus.
I also think nobody asked for this, but I'm going to throw it out there. I think you have to take responsibility. If you're finding this all the time, you're not being engaging enough as a communicator.
Why?
Yeah. If people are tuning out, and you could be monotone, the content could be too slow. There's a number of reasons. But if you're seeing this a lot, I think it might be back to you.
Here's a good technique.
he's just not saying anything.
Yeah.
We didn't lose our microphone again. He actually.
It's silence.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes in a coaching
Gonna stress
session,
Craig out. He's gonna do it a hard time.
sometimes in a coaching situation like that, just stop talking. Just stop talking, create some silence. That silence can be enormously loud in the mind of that person whose focus has shifted. So there are a lot of different ways, including silence, that you can use.
I have another question that came in. Do you mind if we ask that?
No problem.
Sure. So this goes to questions. When do you decide which types of questions you're going to use? Are you doing it during the training session? Are you recommending that you come up with a whole list of questions prior to the session? And how are you making your decisions in the moment?
Well,
Yes,
that's
it's a
tough.
three-parter, yeah.
Yeah, the answer is both.
The answer is both. The first parts, you do it in the moment, and you do it ahead of time. Good coach has questions in his or her mind that they know they want to ask. They know that when they ask them, they will get a response to it. So yes, you've got to have some of those. And then, because you are paying attention and focusing, you will develop questions that you need to ask of your client at that moment. It's
Yes.
perfectly okay.
And how do you decide in the moment? This is a very difficult thing to answer, and the reason is you're watching their body language. You're watching every little nuanced thing. Some people could you can physically. It's palpable. You can feel their anxiety building about the topic, so you need to tread a lot. You may pull back and not be as overt or direct, and you're treading on this area that's very sensitive. And at other times, you need to be very direct and very overt because you've got a tough nut to crack, and they need that kind of coaching. And that is a very difficult thing to say. The only way we could train people to do that is literally by practice and having videos taken and telling, it takes practice.
You know, this word that's on the screen right now that we're focusing on, the word paraphrase, you can use this also around questioning. A good way, it shows you're listening. Well, we all know what paraphrasing is, right? You're repeating your words, what you heard. Okay.
We think we know what it is.
We think we know what
But
it is,
it's
right?
very difficult. I found a huge amount of resistance to people using this most powerful tool. And the reason is they feel like they're agreeing. If somebody says something you don't agree with, you don't want to paraphrase what they said because you think that means you're agreeing with them. Because really good paraphrasing means you neutrally, restate what they said.
Yeah.
And I found that people they don't want to do it because they don't agree with it. But that's the more reason to do it.
Right.
Because it's exactly what makes them relax.
Now, it does two really productive things for you as a coach. One, obviously, it allows you to find out whether or not you got it right. Just paraphrase it.
Very important.
The other person will say, well, no, at this part. Or they'll say, yeah, that's good. So there's that. And number two, it shows them that you are listening, that you are engaged, that
Yes.
you take them seriously. Very important a thing to be able to do for the client. Let them know that you take them seriously.
And I will suggest to you that if it fails and they say, that's not what I said, that's your
Good.
biases showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's where your biases will bubble up and you'll add a new word or you'll twist what they say. That is not good paraphrasing.
Right. All right, let's put a new word up here. This is a new one. You maybe have heard this, maybe not. Paralanguage. What the heck is this and why is it in listening? First of all, let's talk about what it is. Paralanguage is something that you do as the listener while the client is speaking. Paralanguage consists of all of those little things that you do or say while the other person is speaking, such as, oh, oh, or, boy, oh, all of that, those noises, those grunts, what are you laughing at?
It's just the cacophony. It's like,
This is what you do.
yeah, like ready to beatbox over here. Okay.
Beatbox, yeah. But it's all of those little things that you do, those noises that you make, so to speak. They're extremely powerful, and you must learn how to use them so that they are controlled by you. Nodding. Oh. Now here's a good rule of thumb. When you paraphrase, when you paralanguage rather, when you use paralanguage, if you use words as opposed to grunts like all of that, that's good too. But if you use actual words, your paralanguage should be no longer than 3 words. Oh, I see. Isn't that interesting? Then what happened? 3 words, that's enough. If you use 4 words, it's an interruption. They feel like you're interrupting their flow of thinking. Okay? So paralanguage is very, very powerful. It helps give you, it helps give them direction and an affirmation about what you're talking about. So these are the things that, from a listening process, we believe are most important best practices for you to be able to know about and to be able to do. All right? Now, one other thing we want to talk about. Now, I don't know how to emphasize this any more than to put this on the screen. We're going to be talking about framing your feedback. All right, so let's talk about framing feedback. Now, first of all, feedback. Okay, what's that? Now, there are 2 types of feedback from you as a coach. Now, you got to know this. There are 2 types of feedback. There's feedback that simply gives back information that affirms, for example, that you know you've heard something, or feedback. Oh, yeah, I saw that. That was nice, okay, or something like that. Coaching feedback is when you give that plus something advantageous that they could work on, or something critical that they could be thinking about.
Specific.
Something specific in your feedback.
Specificity, very important.
So anyway, how do you frame feedback? Well, now there's something about giving feedback. Now, you're the coach. You're in this relationship. Just don't get crazy about this language. You're the boss. In some way, you're directing things. You've taken the responsibility. You've accepted the responsibility.
And you have to show that confidence. It's very important.
You have
We're not really going into, but
you've accepted, because of the confidence you have in who you are and what you know, you have accepted the responsibility to shape the life of another human being, to influence their brain, to influence their thinking, their behavior, their interactions with others. Tremendous responsibility, folks. You're going to be a one-on-one coach. You got to know you're accepting a huge responsibility in the flow of human behavior. So when you give feedback, everything that you say and every way in which you give feedback is important. Now, we're talking about process. We're not talking about content.
it's fun to acknowledge that we're close on time here. We've got 7 minutes, so.
All right. So when we talk about feedback, here are the things we want you to think about. Let's put them up fairly quickly, okay, Robin?
I'm trying. This
Okay.
thing isn't responding. There we go.
Your volume, your speed, your inflection, your timing, your formality, your facial expression. These are the key things when you give feedback. Volume, you know what that is. Speed, this is different. Let me say a word about this. When we talk about speed, we are not talking about fast and slow. Not talking about that. Speed has two elements. Rate, which is the speed at which you put words together one after the other, just like this. I'm talking to you right now at about 225 words a minute. You understand everything that I've said? Okay. That's different than if I talk to you at a speed like this, which is more about 170 words a minute. It's different. Rate of speed. Then there is pace of speed. Pace is different. Rate, the speed at which you put words together. Pace, the speed at which you put thoughts together. Very, very important difference. And ideas are completely different than some idea might be completely different than another idea. The way you pace those, the time you give your client between saying one thing and then another, like there, I gave you a 2-second pause. That pausing, that pacing, that's what determines pace in the speed of speaking. You can use that in coaching them too, of course, speed that they talk, but it's very important in the way that you give it back to them, speed. Inflection, now inflection, there's only 3 ways you can do inflection. Straight, up, or down, simple. Straight inflection says, today is a nice day. Equal emphasis on each word. That means something to a client when you say it that way. If I say it this way with down inflection, I say, today is a nice day. I go down at the end of it. That's like, boom, done, authoritative. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Today is a nice day. Done. Okay. That's down inflection. If you go up inflection is when you say today's a nice day. So sometimes you hear people talk like this. This is what's called up talk. It's awfully annoying, but this is up talk. So you got inflection. If you do up inflection, some people do it by accident. You don't even know you're doing this. You got to know yourself. What's your inflection like? You better be careful of it. Control it. Control the inflection. Timing. How much time, when you give the feedback. While they're talking, wait till the end of the session. You got to figure this out with your client. How are they learning? How do they learn best? Do they mind being interrupted or interjected? Should you wait? When do you give it? Timing is important. Formality means exactly that. Are you in the relationship that you can be somewhat casual about it? Hey, John, or John, what's the sound of formality or informality? The casualness with which you do it. And facial expression, people look at that all the time. How many times have we coached politicians where the politician is saying one thing coming out of his mouth, but his face looks like something totally different, right?
My favorite was when people go, I'm really happy to be here today.
Yeah.
They don't even do like a basic.
They don't see a facial expression. Nothing. And what is the sound?
Really? Are you really happy to be here today?
So a facial
I never
expression.
would have guessed it.
All right, now listen, there's one more thing you want to tell you about framing feedback. And here, let's put it up on the screen.
Okay, here we go.
Whatever you do, don't overcoach. Don't overcoach, coach.
Pick and choose.
Pick and choose. And just because you can coach on something doesn't mean you should. Maybe your client is not ready to hear that yet. Maybe you're not ready to even give that yet. Just because you think it doesn't mean you should do it. Don't overcoach.
This is a tough one to gauge.
It's
very tough. You're going to make mistakes and learn from them. That's what's going to happen.
Because you're excited, right?
You're excited, and you see so many things, but you really have to prioritize, because when you're dealing with this type of thing, communication is just so closely embedded with someone's personality, with their identity, that it can be a minefield sometimes when you bring things up maybe that they aren't aware of, or they feel overwhelmed by it, or you get a perfectionist or an introvert in front of you who just might get obsessed. I'm not saying that those are obsessive personalities, but you know what I mean? A personality type that may just get so overwhelmed that they actually go backwards instead of forwards.
Because you overcoached them. Just because you knew something and you could do it, and because you were the boss, you did it. Don't overcoach. That's the thing that we're saying to you right there. So now what? All right? We've come to the end of this webinar, and we wish we had a whole lot more time with you, and I hope this has been very, very helpful to you. We've looked at a few things in specific that we consider to be best practices after all the years that we've been doing the coaching. And if there are questions, we'll be glad to talk about the questions briefly. Craig, is there anything that we should talk about in the last few minutes that we have?
No questions came in, but people are saying they love the practical feedback. They're thanking you for your time.
Nice.
All right, good. Unless if you have other questions and you have other things that you want to ask us, here it is. This is the title, Some Best Practices for One-on-One Communication Coaching. There's our email addresses, both of us.
And I don't know if you can see it well because it hyperlinked it. So Robin@speechimprovement.com and Dennis@speechimprovement.com.
Happy to answer any questions that you may have. We'll get right back to you with it. So.
And we'll see you soon.
Yes, please. Let's see you all in Salt Lake City, not too far from now. So until that time, I know we're running out of time.
I don't sign off yet. I think you want to wrap up, right? She wants to say something, I think.
Oh, all right. Well, from the perspective of Robin and Dennis, we're delighted to have had you with us, and we hope it's been helpful. And thanks for listening. And bye for now. Pui, it's all yours.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dennis and Robin. It has been delightful. Thank you for all the wisdom and practical tips from y'all. I just have a few things to go over before Actually, this is right 3 o'clock, so very quickly. I'm going to send you a link with for evaluating this webinar. We want to know what you think, what you learned from this, and what we can do better for our next webinars. We have one last webinar for October, and please, I'll send information on that as well, and you're very welcome to join us. I'll keep it real short right there. I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Pue, and thanks for everyone for stopping in. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, guys. Bye. See you soon.
See ya. Bye.